I was 17, pregnant, and disowned by my parents. But the hardest part wasn't the rejection, it was the silence that followed. My parents had vanished from my life without a trace, leaving me alone to face a future I wasn't prepared for. For years, I lived with the sting of their absence, raising my son, Jason, on my own, promising myself I would never ask for their forgiveness, never let them back into our lives. That is, until the day they called. After nearly 3 decades of silence, they wanted a place in my son's fame. And suddenly, everything I thought I knew about forgiveness was put to the test. I was 17 when I found out I was pregnant. I had just started my senior year of high school. My friends were talking about college applications, boys, and prom dresses, but my reality was far from any of that. I was alone in my bedroom, staring at the 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test, my hands shaking. I could hear my parents talking downstairs, their voices muffled through the floor, and for a moment, it felt like time had stopped. The world outside my room continued, but I was stuck in that terrifying, silent bubble of disbelief. The fear was overwhelming. The weight of it crushed me, not only because I was going to be a mother, but because I had no idea how I was going to do it. I wasn't prepared for this, not in any way. I had been a good student, always obedient and focused on my future. But now, my future had shifted into something I could no longer recognize. Waited until my parents were settled in for the night before going downstairs. My mom sat at the kitchen table, reading the newspaper. My father was in the living room, watching the evening news. The house was quiet, peaceful even, and the last place I wanted to be was in the middle of a conversation that would change everything. "Mum," I called out, my voice tight, almost choking on the words. She looked up, her expression already shifting into something more serious. "What is it, honey?" she asked. I took a deep breath, sitting across from her at the kitchen table. I didn't know how to begin. I didn't know how to tell her that everything had changed. "Mom, I'm pregnant." Her eyes went wide, and for a moment she didn't say anything. She didn't move. I could see her brain working, trying to process the words I had just spoken, but she was frozen, stuck between disbelief and something else I couldn't name. And then, her face hardened. "What did you say?" "I'm pregnant, Mom. I'm keeping the baby." It was the second part of my statement that would seal my fate. Because in that moment, everything changed. The room felt smaller, colder. My mom stood up abruptly, knocking her chair back with the sudden force of her movement. No, you're not," she said, her voice rising. "You're not keeping it." "I am," I said firmly, holding my ground. "I'm going to keep it." The silence that followed was deafening. My mum stared at me, her eyes narrowing, and I could feel my heart pounding. This wasn't just about a baby anymore. It was about everything I thought I knew about my family, my future, and my place in the world. "You've ruined your life," she said, her voice cold and accusing. "How could you be so stupid? You're not ready for this. You're a child yourself." I bit my lip to hold back the tears that were threatening to spill over. I didn't want to cry. I didn't want to be vulnerable. But I was. Because I was a child and I didn't know how to navigate this world of adult decisions. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "But I'm keeping it." The door to the living room opened, and my father appeared in the doorway, his face stern. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice low, almost foreboding. "She's pregnant," my mother said, her voice sharp as a whip. "And she's going to keep it." I told her she couldn't, but she's too far gone to listen. The words hit me like a punch in the stomach. I knew what they meant. This wasn't just about the pregnancy. This was about their perception of me, their only child, who had just thrown away everything they had worked so hard to give me. They expected me to go to college, to be successful, to live up to their standards. And I had just shattered that vision. My father looked at me, his face unreadable. "So, you're going to throw away your future?" His voice was full of disappointment, and it stung deeper than anything he had ever said to me. "I'm not throwing anything away," I said, my voice shaking but strong. "I'm going to be a mother, and I'm going to do it on my own." "You're not welcome here anymore," my father said. His voice as cold as ice. My heart dropped. What? What are you talking about?" I asked, incredulous. This couldn't be happening. "You heard me," my father replied, his words like a final judgment. "You've made your choice. You're not welcome here." And just like that, my life changed. They turned their backs on me. They told me to leave. I didn't even have time to pack. I stood there in the doorway, my hands trembling, as they watched me walk out of the house I had grown up in, the house that no longer felt like home. The first few days after I left home were nothing short of a blur. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a place to go. All I had was a backpack, a few clothes, and the knowledge that I was now truly on my own. I moved from couch to couch, sleeping at friends' houses, trying to find stability wherever I could. But my friends, while kind and supportive, had their own lives to lead. They couldn't offer me much beyond temporary shelter. And as the days turned into weeks, the harsh reality of being a teenage mother, alone and with no support, began to sink in. I was scared. I was exhausted. But there was something inside me that wouldn't let me give up. I knew this wasn't how it was supposed to be. I had dreams for my life before everything changed, and I wasn't about to let those dreams die just because I had a child to raise. It wasn't going to be easy, but I would find a way. I had no choice but to keep going. Asterisk. The days turned into months, and the months into years. I learned how to survive in a world that felt indifferent to my struggles. I had to grow up quickly, my dreams of being a carefree teenager vanishing the day I learned I was pregnant. But somehow, in the midst of everything, I found a new kind of strength, a quiet determination that kept me moving forward. I managed to finish high school, barely scraping by, and took on any job I could find. My son, Jason, was the reason I woke up every morning, even on days when the exhaustion seemed too much to bear. Every night, after a long shift at the diner or the grocery store, I would curl up with him and promise myself that one day we would have a life that was better than this. I would give him everything I never had, everything my parents had denied me. Jason was a bright, curious child. Even as a baby, he had an intensity to him, an energy that was hard to ignore. He was always reaching for something, always wanting to learn. And by the time he was 5, it was clear that he had inherited a special gift. He could pick up anything, a guitar, a basketball, a paintbrush, and master it in a fraction of the time. It took most people. It wasn't until he was 10 years old that I fully realized the scope of his talent. We were living in a small apartment, struggling to make ends meet, but I always made sure Jason had the space to explore his passions. One evening he picked up an old guitar I bought from a thrift store. His small fingers fumbled over the strings, but something magical happened. The sound that came from the guitar wasn't like anything I had ever heard. He didn't just play, it was as if the music flowed through him, as if he had been playing his entire life. I watched in awe, knowing that this was something special. At first, it was just the occasional performance at school talent shows or family gatherings. But as Jason's skill grew, so did his reputation. He began to post videos of himself playing on social media, and within weeks, his followers multiplied. Soon the videos went viral. Jason's talent wasn't just being noticed, it was being celebrated. It was strange, seeing him go from the shy, introverted boy I had raised to a confident, charismatic young man. He started getting invitations to perform at local events, then regional competitions, and before I knew it, he was being offered a recording contract at the age of 16. It was overwhelming, and part of me wanted to hold him back, to protect him from the pressures that came with fame. But another part of me knew this was his dream, and I couldn't stand in his way. Through all of it, I remained his biggest supporter. I never let go of the belief that he could achieve anything he set his mind to. I worked tirelessly, making sure he had the best opportunities, keeping him grounded in the midst of all the chaos that came with fame. As Jason's career took off, my life began to change in ways I could never have imagined. The tiny apartment we lived in felt like a distant memory as we moved into a spacious home with everything we needed. I could afford to send him to the best schools, to hire the best mentors. Life was finally starting to feel right. But with success came new challenges. The fame, the constant pressure, the attention, it was all overwhelming. Jason's life was no longer his own. There were paparazzi, fans, and media scrutiny at every turn. It was a reality that no one could have prepared for. And at times, I wondered if it was too much for him. But Jason never seemed to let it affect him. He remained focused, determined, and grateful for everything that had come his way. He didn't let fame change him, and for that, I was proud of him. It had been nearly a decade since I last heard from my parents. The years had passed in a blur of Jason's success, my constant efforts to keep him grounded, and the long road to finding peace with my past. I had made peace with the fact that my parents had disowned me. I no longer needed their approval to feel worthy, to feel like I had a place in this world. I had built my own family with Jason, and that was enough. But everything changed the day the phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. But something about it felt familiar. I hesitated for a moment before answering. Hello? My voice was shaky, unsure. Is this Emily? The voice on the other end was unfamiliar but strangely calm. It's been a long time. My heart skipped a beat. I knew instantly who it was. It's your mother, she said. For a moment I was frozen. I couldn't breathe. My mother, the woman who had turned her back on me, who had cast me out when I needed her most, was calling me after all these years. I swallowed hard. What do you want? There was a long pause before she spoke again, her voice softer now. I want to see you. And I want to see Jason. He's become famous, hasn't he? We'd like to meet him. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. They wanted to meet my son. They wanted a place in his life. In the life they had abandoned. I didn't know how to feel. Part of me was angry, hurt by the years of abandonment. Another part of me felt conflicted. Jason had never met his grandparents. He had heard about them from me, but he didn't know them. I had always protected him from the pain they had caused me, from the rejection I had endured. But now they wanted back in, not because they had changed, but because Jason was famous. I took a deep breath, my fingers gripping the phone tightly. Why now? I asked, my voice low. We've thought about this a lot, she said. We know we made mistakes, but we've seen Jason's success, and we realize that we've missed so much. We don't want to be strangers to him. We want to be a part of his life, even if it's just a little. The words stung. I had spent so many years learning how to live without them, how to fill the void they had left. Now they wanted to waltz back in as if nothing had happened. I don't know if that's a good idea, I replied, my voice shaking with emotion. You can't just come back into our lives after everything that's happened. You hurt me, and I won't let you do that to Jason. We're sorry, Emily, she said softly. Please, give us a chance to make things right. The conversation ended shortly after, and I sat there, staring at the phone in disbelief. They were asking for forgiveness, but I wasn't sure I was ready to give it. The wounds were too deep, the years of silence too much to ignore. But at the same time, I knew I had to make a choice, one that would affect Jason's life forever. I spent the next few days in a haze of confusion. Jason's fame was growing every day, but now there was a new pressure, one that had nothing to do with his talent or success. It was the weight of the past, the presence of people who had abandoned me, now trying to find their way back into my life. Jason, of course, had no idea about the phone call. He was busy preparing for his upcoming tour, and I didn't want to burden him with the emotional turmoil I was feeling. He had enough on his plate. But eventually, I had to tell him. One evening, after dinner, we sat together in the living room, and I finally explained everything. The call, the request to meet, and the difficult decision I was facing. Jason listened quietly, his eyes thoughtful but not surprised. He had always been wise beyond his years, and I knew that he would understand the complexity of the situation. "I don't know what to do, Mom," I confessed. "Part of me wants to protect you from the pain I went through, but another part of me wonders if they can change. If they even want to." Jason placed a hand on mine, his touch warm and reassuring. "Mom, I trust you. Whatever decision you make, I'll support you. But you need to do what's best for you ... And for me." His words brought tears to my eyes. I had always tried to protect him from the mistakes of the past, but he was right. This was my decision to make, and whatever I chose, we would face it together. The days after the phone call were filled with sleepless nights. My mind raced and my heart felt torn in two. On one hand, there was the raw pain of the years I had spent without my parents, years in which I had rebuilt my life from nothing. I had fought for every scrap of dignity I had left when they disowned me. Could I really open that door again, knowing how much damage had already been done? And then there was Jason. I had always kept him away from the past, away from the hurt. He had no memory of his grandparents. For him, they were little more than names on a family tree. But now, they were real, and they wanted to be a part of his life. I couldn't ignore that, no matter how much I wanted to. I couldn't help but wonder, was I holding on to the anger and resentment from the past, or was I truly protecting Jason from the same pain I'd suffered? The weight of that question was suffocating. I spent hours speaking with friends, mentors, and even a therapist. They all asked me the same question. What do you want for Jason? The answer wasn't simple. Yes, I wanted him to experience a healthy relationship with his family, but I also didn't want to risk reopening old wounds. What if they disappointed him too? What if their reappearance was just a way to latch onto his fame? Just like everyone else who had tried to get close to him for the wrong reasons. At the same time, I knew I had to make peace with the past, if not for myself, then for Jason. He deserved to have the opportunity to form his own relationships, even if they were imperfect. And who was I to dictate his future? The child I had raised was now a young man, one capable of making his own decisions. I couldn't shelter him from the complexities of life forever. This was his choice too. One evening, after a particularly trying day, I sat down with Jason to have a long conversation. He had been away on a tour for a few weeks, but now that he was home, I needed to talk to him face to face. I knew the decision I made would affect him more than anyone else. "Mom," he said, sensing my nervousness, "you look like you're carrying the weight of the world. Talk to me." I swallowed hard. "Jason, I've been thinking a lot about your grandparents. They reached out to me. They want to meet you. They've seen what you've done, and now they want to be a part of your life." Jason raised an eyebrow, a look of cautious curiosity on his face. "What do you mean? They want to be a part of my life?" I sighed. "They want to meet you. They want to be involved. After everything that happened with me, ... After they disowned me, ... Now they're asking for forgiveness." His expression remained unreadable, but I could see the wheels turning in his mind. He had always been perceptive, and I knew that he would take the time to think this through before giving me an answer. "You don't have to do this, you know," I said, my voice cracking slightly. I'm not pushing you to meet them. I'm not pushing you to forgive them. I just wanted you to know that it's up to you too. Jason sat back in his chair, his fingers tapping lightly on the armrest. I've heard a lot about them from you. And I know it was really hard for you. But I also know that you've always said that we can't change the past, only how we deal with it moving forward. If they want to be a part of my life, I'm open to that. I'm not going to hold their mistakes against them, but I don't want them to think that everything is just magically okay because of what I've done. His words hit me like a wave. Jason was more mature than I gave him credit for. He wasn't naive. He understood the complexities of family, of forgiveness, and of healing. His decision was balanced. He wasn't offering blind forgiveness, but he wasn't closing the door entirely either. I'll do what you think is best, Mom, he said, squeezing my hand. Whatever happens, we'll handle it together. And just like that, the decision felt clearer. I had been trying to protect him from everything, my past, my pain, my scars, but Jason wasn't a child anymore. He was strong enough to face the complexities of life, just like I had to. And maybe, just maybe, he could help me heal too. The day I called my parents back was one of the hardest days of my life. The phone call felt surreal, like I was stepping into a past I had long since buried. My heart pounded as I dialed the number, the sound of the phone ringing in my ear almost too loud. Hello? It was my mother's voice on the other end. Her tone was polite, almost tentative, as if unsure how I would respond. It's me, I said, my voice shaking. I've talked to Jason, and we're willing to meet. But I need you to understand something. This isn't just about your relationship with him. This is about me, too. You hurt me, and I'm not sure I can forgive you for that. But I'm giving you this chance for him. Not for you. Not for me. For him. There was silence on the other end. I could almost feel my mother processing the weight of what I was saying. We understand, she replied finally. We don't expect you to forget what happened. But we want to make things right. For him. And for you, if you'll allow it. It was the most vulnerable I had ever been with my parents. They didn't deserve forgiveness, not in the traditional sense. But I had to acknowledge that. For Jason's sake, I couldn't keep holding on to the past. The past had shaped me, but it didn't have to define my future.